Welcome to the Involvement Report, brought to you by the Heritage Area Agency on Aging and Kirkwood Community College. My name is Ingrid Wenzel. The Involvement Report brings you news and information for seniors, people with disabilities, and their families in our community. We are here today for the first time in Kirkwood's brand new studio located on the main campus in Cedar Rapids. This month we're going to learn about a very real and critical issue in our community: elder abuse. It is believed that only 1 in 23 cases of elder abuse is even reported. We are going to start the program by watching an excerpt from An Age for Justice: Confronting Elder Abuse in America, produced by the National Center on Aging.
I don't think people in this country like to talk or think about it.
Most people think of elder abuse as somebody beating an older person.
This is one of the most invisible crimes.
It's very difficult for me because I'm very friendly, and I think that that's why they took advantage of that.
They'd always steal everything, whether it was money or jewelry.
I think one of the things that we bump up against with elder abuse is shame, embarrassment, capacity.
There is elder abuse occurring in probably every zip code in the United States.
Elder abuse is a dark mark on our humanity.
We're all going to get old, and we're all going to be potential victims.
We're so conscious of all kinds of human rights, and this is an extremely basic human right.
Elder abuse is a national problem that's only going to get worse with the aging of the population. We need to have a systemic approach to this so that when our children or our children's children become senior citizens, that they don't face the same abuse and neglect that our seniors face today.
My aunt has always been the type of person that adapted to whatever was around her. Very, very strong woman, and nothing much scares her very badly. She just adapts.
I don't need nobody. She's the only one to take care of me.
My aunt's son, who is the grandson's father, actually was having some financial problems and needed to sell their home very quickly. The mother had already died a couple years before. They moved in here, then he died, and the grandkids were left behind. And then as they got older, things just got even more wilder with their involvement with things, drugs and such. So that even though we had seen a lot of things going on, or a lot of activity, people in and out, we kept checking, and she thought everything was still kind of fine. But one day my mom came home from visiting her and said, "Do you know that your aunt has a security door on her bedroom now?"
When we went to the house, we found that there was a metal security grate type door on her bedroom. So it was a very remarkable situation.
We had spent hundreds, thousands of hours in the last 3 years here dealing with crime directly related with this house and kind of in concentric circles away from the house.
They had informed me that the city of Hayward was looking to take her home, sell her home, put her in a rest home, and that in my opinion would kill her. She wouldn't have her home, she wouldn't have her garden. So I came over, I asked her to come and have lunch with me so I could get her away from all the busyness that was here. And I told her, "Do you realize what's going on?" And she was starting to realize what was and the potential of happening. And I asked her, "Can I help you, if you allow me to?" And she said yes.
So the very next opportunity we had to do this problem housing abatement program called SMASH, we brought it here. We found Miss Bastion, the homeowner. We found her grandson, several people who were part of the local gang, some people that were on parole, and a bunch of people who were under the influence of heroin. It was really sad.
We have so many cases where an elderly person is living in their own home, they own the home outright, and their children or their grandchildren or a caregiver slowly takes over, and the elderly person becomes the prisoner in their own home.
Elder mistreatment means to me, it means self-neglect, where an elder is not able to take care of himself or herself, and it means neglect by others.
I am joined by Tracy Robertson, the Heritage Area Agency on Aging Regional Protective Services Coordinator. Tracy's going to share information about elder abuse in general and about current public policy that seeks to support abused seniors in Iowa. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, today is a difficult topic, but an important one. And you've brought a lot of information to share with us. And I know some people are even surprised to hear that elder abuse occurs right here in our communities, but unfortunately and sadly, it does.
It does, yes.
So this is a critical issue, and we're going to begin today to talk about just elder abuse in general, and maybe you could start there. You know, what is elder abuse?
Well, we know that elder abuse is grossly underrecognized and underreported in America. I wanted to start with some statistics. 1 in 10 older adults in America are victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. 1 in every 2 victims have some type of dementia. For every 1 case of elder abuse reported, 23 cases go unreported. We know that elder abuse victims have a much shortened lifespan than those who are not abused, and financial exploitation and neglect are the most common types of abuse that we see here, especially in the Heritage region.
So who is the typical victim of elder abuse, if there is one?
There is. Women are nearly twice as likely to be victims of elder abuse than men. Victims are usually in their 70s or older, and oftentimes they're dependent. And we'll talk a little bit about dependency in a few moments. What's so alarming is that 77 million baby boomers are entering the age of early retirement. And so it's just going to be an explosion of abuse, especially financial exploitation.
Now, who are typically the perpetrators of, let's say, financial exploitation? You indicated that that was one of the most typical types of abuse, or most common types of abuse.
It can be strangers who integrate themselves into their lives. Oftentimes, sadly, it's family, it's friends, it's neighbors, it's other trusted influences, and it could be businesses who are scamming the older adult and making victims of them.
Now, in Iowa, I understand that there's a clear delineation between, well, maybe not so clear, but we need to understand the difference between elder abuse and dependent adult abuse. Can you help us understand the difference?
Absolutely. Elder abuse, according to the Older Americans Act, is the abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a person aged 60 and older. In Iowa, we have dependent adult abuse laws within the Iowa Code, and there are specific criteria to be met to be deemed a dependent adult. And one of those things is that they need to be age 18 and older, there must be a caretaker, and there must be an allegation of abuse recognized by Iowa Code 235B. And that would include physical abuse, sexual abuse and exploitation, financial exploitation, abuse by a caregiver, and self-neglect.
Okay. Now, you did share and bring information specifically about a dependent adult abuse definition and also a caretaker definition. I'm wondering if you could share those with us, please.
Absolutely. A dependent adult is a person, as I mentioned, with 18 years of age or older who is unable to protect his or her own interests or unable to adequately perform or obtain services necessary to meet essential human needs. And this could be a result of a physical or a mental condition that requires assistance from another.
And a caretaker?
It's a related or a non-related person who has the responsibility for the protection, the care, the custody of a dependent adult as a result of assuming this responsibility voluntarily, by contract, through employment, or by order of the court.
Okay, well that's a mouthful, but I think once we move through the program that will resonate even more with us. Now, there is an exceptional program, and I know that you provide leadership to that program in our community. It's the Elder Abuse Intervention Program, and this might be a good time to to bring things up a little bit and say that there is hope and direction and support for individuals in our community.
There is. The Elder Abuse Intervention Program focuses on the prevention, the detection, the reporting, and the intervention for victims of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation by presenting elders with options to enhance their lifestyle choices. And we recognize all the types of abuse that's recognized in the Iowa Code. However, we also include those by the National Centers on Aging, which do include verbal and psychological abuse and abandonment as
So
well.
the different types of abuse, so we've got physical abuse, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, denial of critical care by a caretaker, self-denial of critical care, verbal and psychological abuse, and then abandonment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is, why is the Elder Abuse Intervention Program needed? Why?
It is absolutely needed to assist those abused Iowans age 60 and older who do not meet the requirement to be assisted under Iowa's dependent adult abuse laws.
So what you're saying is Iowa has a law in place to support dependent adults, but there are older adults whose needs, even though they are abused, cannot be met under
That
that
is
code.
correct,
Okay, so
yes.
that's why, all right, very good. So who does, and I'm assuming you know, that's wonderful about being on our community, is we've always been a community that partners, that works together to solve and address issues in our community. So who are the partners in the Elder Abuse Initiative?
We partner with the Department of Human Services, oftentimes law enforcement, county attorneys. We have multidisciplinary team meetings to discuss challenging cases. Lynn County Triad, which is stopping crime against seniors, avoiding scams, identity theft, case management for the frail elderly, hospitals, financial institutions, mental health providers, and just other providers in the community. So we have strong support from all of these entities.
And I think you shared with me, these are all volunteers. These are people who are spending
Correct.
their time and resources and energy to support vulnerable people in our community. Very, very good. Now, in order to be eligible to be part of, and Lord knows you people do not want to be eligible for the program, most certainly.
Right.
However, there is criteria for folks to be engaged in the program. Can you share with us who would be eligible to participate in the program?
Sure. They must be age 60 and older. They can be dependent or independent, and they must be a victim of some type of abuse, one of those 7 types that we mentioned as defined within the National Centers on Elder Abuse. They do not live in a licensed healthcare facility because the Department of Inspections and Appeals investigates those types
So
of
folks
abuse.
need to be living in the community, in a community setting,
do.
not an institutional-based supports. Okay.
And they also need to be willing to accept services to improve their situation.
Very good. Okay. Now, we are going to run through, my understanding is some red flags of physical abuse. And I think that, we had talked a little before we started today that there are some photos on here that may be disturbing to some viewers.
There are disturbing photos, however, they're very compelling, and it really tells a story of what we do see, and that elder abuse does exist in our community, unfortunately.
Okay, so very good. So some of the red flags of physical abuse.
Injury that's not been cared for properly, injuries that are not compatible with the history of what the older adult is saying happened, pain upon touch, obvious cuts, lacerations, puncture wounds, dehydration, malnourishment without an illness-related cause, or even rapid weight loss, sunken eyes, cheeks, skin problems, eye problems such as retinal detachment even, absence of hair or hemorrhaging below the scalp, soiled bed and clothing, locked in a room, being isolated from folks, evidence of unset bones, or excessive medication or no medication provided at all when there should be.
Now, there are also some red flags for sexual abuse. Can you please review those with us?
Yes. The person's behavior changes drastically, and it's new behaviors such as lashing out, acting out angry, inappropriate affect. The person is depressed, other symptoms of mental health issues. And again, it's new behaviors. The person acts afraid in the presence of the caretaker. They don't want to be left alone with the caretaker. There could be genital bruises, bleeding, redness, swelling, or even sexually transmitted diseases.
Okay. Well, you had indicated earlier that financial exploitation is one of the most common types of abuse perpetrated against older adults. And we now have an excerpt from an Age for Justice, the video we had watched a portion of prior to joining us today, and it's produced by the National Center on Aging, and it's going to highlight the impact of financial exploitation on seniors.
Yes.
A lot of times caregivers can speed up the process or even facilitate the process where an elder dies earlier than they would.
When I look back on my dad's life, how interesting it was, the time I really treasure his stories. He's a Pearl Harbor survivor. He told me what Pearl Harbor was like being in the Navy. That Sunday morning when they're at church and they see these planes flying over, and they just thought it was a practice. And then he says to me, why were they practicing on Sunday? And of course, then everything just broke loose on Hawaii. And then later in life, after the war, he got a job with the Yellow Pages and ended up in sales, which he was very good at. And he was with the Yellow Pages for, 35 years. I don't think he ever missed a day. And this can happen to anybody, and I never thought it would certainly happen to me or my dad. Everything was going smooth. In October of 2007, I hired her at $250 a month just to take him to the doctors or take him to the grocery store so he could buy food or whatever, and that type thing. November comes. Now I'm getting all his financials. I get a credit card statement. A trip to Chicago for $485 on my dad's credit card. $1,350 for a 10% down payment on a timeshare in Las Vegas. A ladies' President Rolex watch. A diamond ring for $7,400. So now I'm going, wait a minute. So I go to my dad and I said, did you give her permission to use your credit card to book all these things? He was shocked and he said, no, I'd never do that.
We went through a number of conversations and meetings regarding the case, and eventually we then filed charges against the caregiver.
He loses his own self-esteem. He's losing weight. He's upset and crying all the time. His comment to me, because I'm old, she thinks I'm stupid.
There's a real pattern to these type of cases. Generally, the caregiver endears themselves to the elder, whether it be a man or a woman, and is able to then manipulate the elder in a fashion that a lot of times the children are just almost amazed by.
Your actions betrayed someone who genuinely loved and cared about you. You not only broke his spirit, you broke his heart. And she was a direct contribution to his death.
I've seen cases of elder mistreatment where elders simply have died as a result of that.
I'm joined again by Tracy Robertson from the Heritage Area Agency on Aging. She's going to expand on her earlier comments about elder abuse, but she's going to begin by talking about some of the warning signs of financial exploitation.
Great. Well, we know that the older adult is often confused and has no knowledge of their finances. There's a disparity between their income and assets and their lifestyle or living arrangement, so they may have income, but they may not have enough food, for instance. The caretaker expresses an unusual interest in the amount of money being expended for the care of the older adult. Unpaid bills when resources should be adequate. The caretaker is evasive about financial arrangements. There is unusual activity in the bank account. The dependent adult may turn over their financial affairs to someone in exchange for lifelong care, for instance. We've seen that a lot, but does not have the basic necessities such as food and shelter. And the caretaker begins to handle the dependent adult's financial affairs without their presence or without consultation with them.
Well, and there are also some real red flags for denial of critical care by a caretaker. And sometimes this is called neglect, and I think there's some confusion about this because some people don't understand, what is a situation where an individual has the choice to live in a certain situation, and when are they really in a situation of neglect where their basic needs aren't being met.
That's right. Well, there would be a failure to provide adequate food by the caretaker, malnourishment, no food in the home, or food spoiling, lack of clothing to adequately provide protection from the weather, lack of heat, unsanitary or hazardous conditions we see a lot of, and that's what I'm going to talk in a few minutes in a case study I'd like to present to you. Refusal to provide a medical evaluation for conditions detected by medical personnel, failure to follow through with medical recommendations or treatment, unable to manage affairs because of that confusion and deterioration. We see, as I mentioned, 1 out of 2 of these folks have some type of dementia. Leaving a dependent adult who is incapable of self-supervision alone without a responsible caretaker, knowingly selecting an inappropriate caretaker, one that might be taking advantage of them, and abandonment are some of the red flags.
There are also some red flags associated with self-denial of critical care or self-neglect. Can you please share those with us?
Sure. That would be the individual's failure to provide adequate food, shelter, or clothing, intentional self-abuse, suicidal statements, refusal of medical treatment or medications, refusal of services that might alleviate the situation when at one time they may have been accepted, refusal of visitors, isolating themselves and denying that there's a problem, whereas before they may not have denied a problem.
Now, I know there are a number of barriers that prevent people either from getting help, seeking help, or even identifying that there is a need. Can you share with us some of those barriers?
Sure, and there are so many barriers to reporting abuse, but here's just a few. They're very embarrassed, very ashamed about disclosing abuse, that they are victims. If you recall, Mickey Rooney was very embarrassed and ashamed to come forward that he was a victim of abuse. Fear of backlash from the perpetrator. No trusted person to talk to about the abuse, because a lot of these folks live alone and they have no family or friends around them. The complexity of managing abuse by the care providers who may be family members or friends. Fear of not being believed or considered a credible reporter of abuse. And again, we see that a lot of times with folks who have a type of dementia. And maybe just not even knowing who to call to report the abuse to.
Now, I still hear, and it's to my surprise, because obviously I've been working with you and a variety of other individuals who's served as an advocate for abused older people in our community, but there are some people who still believe there is no abuse that occurs with older adults in our community. And you have brought a case study with you to share with us, and I think this would be a good time for us to hear a story about a local community member who's experienced abuse.
Sure. This type of abuse involved financial exploitation and neglect by a caregiver. It did happen in the Heritage region and involved a 99-year-old mother who was bedridden, who was being cared for by a daughter who was in her 60s who had mental health issues, and also a privately paid caregiver who was financially exploiting them, who was doing the bare minimum but charging an exorbitant fee for her services. The mother was in contaminated, incontinent clothing, soiled bed, not receiving adequate nutrition, and there was also animal hoarding involved in this case as well. There were, I think, approximately 75 cats who would come in and out of the home. It's an old farmhouse, through a hole in the basement, And so there were cat feces and urine all over the house, and it was just complete filth. And so it was hard to imagine that anyone could live in an environment such as this. DHS, the Department of Human Services, and our protective service specialist did work together to talk to the family, get a guardianship in place, and as much as we advocate here at Heritage to try to keep people safe and independent in their homes, there are some cases that it's just not possible. I mean, it would have required biohazard cleanup, just an extensive amount of services, and we just felt that it just was not a safe environment to be living in.
Well, and I imagine there was concerns that even if the house was possibly being able to be cleaned, that there wouldn't be an appropriate caregiver when that individual did return home.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So the adult daughter is in an assisted living facility, and the mother is in the nursing facility part of the same facility. So they are together, and it did turn out to be a somewhat happy ending. But there was still the fact that they were victims of abuse and exploitation.
And you can imagine that probably had been going on for some time for the house to become in that condition and for her health status to decline that rapidly.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's critical for folks to really hear about how people in East Central Iowa are being impacted by elder abuse.
Correct.
We'll be back shortly for more information on elder abuse in Iowa. I'm joined again by Tracy Robertson from the Heritage Area Agency on Aging. We've had some dedicated discussion about elder abuse in Iowa, and now we're going to talk a little bit about why an elder abuse law is needed in Iowa. In Iowa, we do have a dependent adult abuse law, but unfortunately that law does not allow some individuals who are older adults who are experiencing abuse receive the support and intervention they need. So as far as your work and your experience with Iowa's dependent adult abuse law, why would an elder abuse law enhance public policy to support older adults in Iowa?
Well, Iowa is only one of 5 states in the United States that does not have an elder abuse law. Iowa only, as you mentioned, has a dependent adult abuse law. Dependent adult abuse laws impact folks age 18 and older. However, elder abuse laws are broader because the victim of elder abuse does not have to be independent or have a caretaker. Elder abuse is defined by the Older Americans Act as abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a person age 60 and older. And pursuant to the Older Americans Act, the Iowa Department on Aging is responsible for the implementation of an elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation program. On the other hand, dependent adult abuse, as defined by the Iowa Code, the Department of Human Services is responsible for that program. But as we have mentioned previously, there's very specific criteria that must be met for an individual to be receiving assistance under the dependent adult abuse laws.
Now, I know that there has been a task force that was legislatively mandated in 2012, and they met over the summer of 2012 to develop recommendations regarding elder abuse in Iowa, and it was quite comprehensive. There was a statewide summit held on elder abuse that was hosted by the Iowa Department on Aging. It was hosted in August of 2012. And there were recommendations made that were shared with state legislators just about a month ago now here in Iowa. Can you share with us what some of those recommendations included?
Sure. One of the task force recommendations for the Iowa General Assembly was to establish an Iowa elder abuse law that at a minimum defines elders as protected and specifies the age for elders. It protects against all of the National Center on Elder Abuse recognized categories of abuse, those 7 that we spoke about previously. It requires mandatory reporting of abuse and defines a penalty for failure to report abuse.
I know there's been advocacy around elder abuse for years in our great state, and I know that there has been a coalition that has been meeting, and you've been providing leadership for that through the Heritage Area Agency on Aging. It is part of a region-wide effort to support individuals who are experiencing abuse and raise awareness about abuse in our community. And there's a range of incredible individuals and organizations who are engaged in that effort. It's called the Elder Abuse Intervention Coalition, and I understand its mission was to expand and improve elder abuse prevention, protection, and intervention services for older adults by raising community awareness and building support for public policies that address the needs of abused older Iowans. And there are significant and important goals that were established by the coalition. Can you review those for us?
Sure. Some of the goals are to increase support for the Elder Abuse Intervention Program and statewide funding for client intervention services, to establish an Iowa elder abuse law to support the tenets of the Older Americans Act, and to reinstate and fully fund the Iowa Office of Substitute Decision Maker. So those are some very important advocacy things that we are doing.
And if there's individuals who are interested in being engaged in the coalition, can they contact you for more information?
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
and that's at the Heritage Area Agency on Aging, at the number
Yes.
listed below?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Now, we've talked a lot about issues and very difficult topics in relationship to elder abuse, but I think it's critical that we talk about what resources are available in the community to help individuals who are experiencing abuse, individuals in the community who may have questions about elder abuse. And if you could share this with us, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. The Elder Abuse Intervention Program serves any adult age 60 and older, including persons with disabilities, in Lynn, Johnson, Cedar, and Jones counties. To make a referral to the Elder Abuse Intervention Program, you contact myself at the number listed, 398-5559, or toll free at 800-332-5934. You can also email me as well. And then you can also make a report to the Department of Human Services to report dependent adult abuse in the community. You can also contact the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals to report abuse in a facility or a program. And if there's imminent danger at all, definitely contact local law enforcement.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I thank you for being here with us today. You work daily with a very, very challenging social issue, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us in the Involvement Report. See you next month for more news and information impacting older adults, people with disabilities, and their families in East Central Iowa.